How many people sitting in this august body are Shofarians? Raise your hand. It's going to be a participation drill. Very good. I got an email recently, last couple days, and a guy, I think it's a guy, he said, love your videos, blah, blah. I guess you guys are practicing Shofarianism, and from my understanding, and then he went on to describe exactly what we don't do. And so I wrote him back and I said, no, we don't practice Shofarianism. We practice the way. And I kind of use it as an opportunity to discuss the way and how we follow things. And what we do and what we think and how we try to live life. But you have to admit that amongst the greater us, the Messianic Hebrew roots, Torah observant, Netzarim, is there another word, phrase I'm missing? Hebrew Israelite community, the greater one, we're different. Right? We have like ways, we have culture that we're kind of developing as a group. And it's kind of interesting for me to watch it develop. It's the things that we hold valuable, the things that we don't, maybe not even related to the word, just life in general. And so, it got me thinking, what does it mean to be a Shofarian? And a long time ago, back when Brother Jason and Abby and Justin came out here, and there were some other people here, I remember thinking, well, how do we differentiate the people who actually live right here and the people who live nearby but hang out with us all the time? Like, blah, blah. It's like I decide we're not going to. You're a Shofarian. If you want to be a Shofarian, be a Shofarian. That's what I always say to people. There's no difference in that. And we do have kind of a funky culture about things. There's probably good things and bad things to that, to think about. How many people here, show of hands, are Christian? Raise your hand.
You don't think Christ is Messiah?
There's a very small smattering. How many people here are Messianic? We get one of those. 2 maybe. All right, out of 20 plus people. All right. Today's sermon is entitled, What's in a Name? All right. Let us start not in Acts. We'll come back to Acts. Let's start at the end of Matthew 28. There's Mark. Matthew 28. 16. We can start in 16. Then the 11 disciples. Why is there only 11?
Because one guy murdered.
Yeah, he wasn't a martyr.
Oh, it says later, sorry.
Judas went and hung himself. Go thou and do likewise. How not to cherry pick verses. All right, then the 11 disciples went away into Galilee, into a mountain where Yeshua, Jesus, had appointed them. Go to this mountain. And when they saw him, Yeshua, Jesus, they worshipped him. And I believe in scriptures it says they bowed down to him, right? Recognizing who he is. But some doubted. Now remember, this is after he died and rose again and has come back. Right? And so that's why they're doubting. They're like, man, what is going on? All right, you're the master, but what's going on? So they doubted. And Jesus, Yeshua, came and he spake unto them, saying, all power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. Go y'all, therefore, and teach all nations. Now that word nations is ethnos in the Greek, and it means all types of people, all races, all... Whether, what?
All nations.
All nations. Whether yellow, black, or white, he will keep us in. Something like that. Jesus loves the little children of the world. Go and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name. And that's an important thing right there. It says in the name, and it's not plural. It's the name. And then it continues on, and there's some contention whether this was actually in the original writings, this next little bit. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. Amen. Now, the 11 disciples, starting back in 16 again, the 11 disciples went away into Galilee. What's a disciple? Taught one. What's that mean? English, modern English. Students.
Apprentice.
They're students. They're students of Yeshua, the Master. So they're following him. So did he have more than 11 disciples?
He has many more.
He had a lot more, right? Sometimes he had whole crowds of people following him around who were then his students. What are apostles?
Educated. Step up. Graduated from.
Apostle, if you translate that back to the Greek and then back to the English, means sent one. So these 11 disciples are in fact apostles because he's sending them, right? He's saying go out into all the nations. So here's a little thing. I used to say, somebody taught me this in Asia, let me get this one right. All Sikhs are Singhs, but not all Singhs are Sikhs. That's a phrase about India. In this, all apostles are disciples, but not all disciples are apostles. This is, of course, called the Great Commission, right? Go ye into all the world and preach the word and baptize people in my name. And it's interesting that he's talking to his disciples, who are his taught ones, his students, but he's really talking to his apostles. And it makes us think, then, what's in a name? Why is he saying disciples here instead of apostles? Does that mean that you, sister, are supposed to go into all the world and teach all the nations and baptize people? That's not where we're going today. That's not the sermon for today. It is something certainly worthy of thinking about. Disciples, apostles, what's in a name? What's it mean to be one, to be called one, and not the other? So that was by way of prelude to Acts 26. So turn with me now, please, to Acts 26. And catching us up, reviewing again, Paul is before Festus, who's the governor of that whole area, and they brought in this visiting King Agrippa, who is the, this sounds so harsh, I like it, the Roman-loving Jew, right? It just sounds like, ugh. But he is, right? He's a Jew who's firmly in the pocket of Rome, which is why he's in the position he's in, and we went into that last week. And let's just start in 23. We were already there last week, but we'll just kind of do it for context. Start in verse 23 of Acts 26. So Paul is saying, hey, I've been here. You guys know. I'm only preaching what Moses and the prophets have said would happen. You know, and he's talking to Agrippa. So you understand this because you're a Jew, that Christ, and remember we talked about that last week, Christ, the anointed, the Messiah, Christos, should suffer, and that he should be the first that should rise from the dead, and he should show the light unto the people and to the Gentiles. Which, wow, that just kind of goes in with the Great Commission and all the nations. And as he thus spake for himself, Festus said with a loud voice, Paul, you're beside yourself. Too much learning makes you crazy. All right, that's me paraphrasing the King James there a little bit. But he goes, man, you've got so much book knowledge, so much school knowledge, you ain't got no common sense, boy. I mean, you know, that's kind of what that reads like. It's like you're crazy. You're a nut to believe this stuff. But Paul said, I'm not crazy. I'm not mad, most noble Festus, but speak forth the words of truth and soberness. Paul doesn't back down from that. A lot of people would back down from that. Somebody just said, you're talking like a crazy person. And you're like, well, yeah, I guess it may seem a little crazy to you. See, that's another way to soften that. He's like, nah, I'm not crazy. I'm speaking words of truth. Right? And so he doesn't give an inch on that. For the king, he's pointing now at Agrippa, he knows of these things, before whom I also speak freely. For I am persuaded that none of these things are hidden from him, for this thing was not done in a corner. This stuff isn't just something that just happened that people are getting told about. King Agrippa, do you believe the prophets? I know you believe. Kind of answers this question for him. And it also kind of puts him in a corner. Because now if he doesn't believe, he actually has to say, well, no, I don't really believe the prophets. So he says, I do. Verse 28. As a matter of fact, so that brings us up to where we are today. And I'm just going to read 28 to the end, and then we'll go back. So then Agrippa says unto Paul, almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian. And Paul said, I would to God that not only thou, but also all that hear me this day were both almost and altogether such as I am, except for these bonds. And when he had thus spoken, the king rose up, and the governor, and Bernice, and they that sat with them. And when they were gone aside, they talked between themselves, saying, this man does nothing worthy of death or of bonds. And then said Agrippa unto Festus, this man might have been set at liberty if he had not appealed unto Caesar. that's where we're going in Acts today. Let's back up and look at that just a skosh. Now, Paul has been defending himself against all comers. And in this case, when he's talking to King Agrippa, he kind of gets off of, he starts out, hey, look, I'm a Pharisee. I'm a Jew born and raised of the Pharisee sect. I'm not doing anything wrong. It's kind of like looking at Paul. I know what I'm doing. Trust me, I'm not breaking any laws. But then Paul switches gears. Paul is an apostle, a sent one of Yeshua, and he's switching gears, and he's starting to preach Yeshua, the way. That's what he's doing to Agrippa. We read before how he's going to go before kings for my sake and yada, yada. And so that's what he's doing. Let's go back to verse 16 and 26. Just kind of turn the page back and just look at this. Paul, as he was talking to Agrippa in this speech that he just gave, he's relating what Jesus had told him on the road to Damascus. Verse 16, and this is what Yeshua said, "But rise and stand upon thy feet, for I have appeared unto thee for this purpose." Okay, so here is why Yeshua appears to Paul on the road to Damascus. "To make thee a minister and a witness, both of these things which thou hast seen, and of those things which I will appear unto thee, delivering thee from the people and from the Gentiles unto whom I now send thee." All right, so you're going to be a witness for me. You're going to be a witness for what you know. You're going to be a witness for things you're going to see. And here is what you're going to witness. Here is what you're going to see as a result of that. Verse 18. "To open their eyes," that's the first one. Second, "to turn them from darkness to light." That's the second. Third, "from the power of Satan unto God," so to turn them from Satan unto Elohim, "that they may receive forgiveness of sins, an inheritance among them which are sanctified," or set apart, "by the faith that is in me," in Yeshua. All right, so he's going to turn people from darkness to light. He's going to turn them from the power of Satan unto God, so that they can receive forgiveness of sins and inheritance among them which are set apart by faith in Yeshua. Sanctified. That's one of those words. It's kadeshified, right? It's set apart, just like holy is set apart, just like saint is set apart one. It's all set apart. It doesn't come out good in the English. It comes out better in the Hebrew, which is then translated into Greek and back into English for us here. Who are those which are set apart in faith in Yeshua? Disciples of Yeshua, but then when he's gone and gone away and the church is left to carry on, it's those who are in the way, right? We're going to get to who they were, because 28 again, "Agrippa says unto Paul, You almost persuaded me to be a Christian." So, you almost persuaded me to be a Christian, unstated, like you are. Paul's a Christian. So then we go back and we look at that word, Christian, and it's Christiano, which comes from Christos, which is Christ. Christiano means what?
Follower.
Nope. Christiano means anointed. Christos is the anointed. What's Messiah mean? Ha-Mashiach.
Yah saves.
Nope. Ha-Mashiach means the anointed. What's Messianic mean? The anointed-ic. That's what Christian means. The anointed-ic. There is no difference in the word Messianic and Christian. When you break it back down to the original Hebrew, which they were all referring to, when you break it down to the meaning, they all mean followers of the anointed one. That's what Messianic means. That's what Christian means. So these disciples are Christians. They're Messianics. They're us. What's in a name, right?
It's modern name.
Yeah, we're going to come to that. All right. So that's, if we look at 18, back again to 18, to be a Christian, which is what he's saying, you almost made me be a Christian, is these people who have their eyes open, who've turned from darkness to light, who have turned from the power of Hasatan unto Elohim, and who have received forgiveness of their sins and inheritance amongst them, which are sanctified by faith, which is in me. And we could take that whole concept of being sanctified unto him, because Yeshua is God made man in the flesh. He said, I and the Father are one. Yah has people set apart to himself, and those people are? Who? Israel. Israel are a special people, a peculiar people unto Yah. He sets them apart unto himself. They are sanctified unto him. We are therefore Israel. And whether you're born Israel or not, and am I going to say that here, or is this just, yeah, I think I'm just going to go there now. Terms, right? Hebrew Israelite. How many people here are Hebrew Israelites?
With that, right?
There's over 20 people sitting out here, and I submit to you that at best, one person is a Hebrew Israelite. And that would be Justin. The rest of y'all may be Israelites, but I seriously doubt you're Hebrews just by looking at you. And that's another sermon for another time, but it goes back to if you have a plague and a sore, and if a yellow hair comes up in it, you're in trouble. If a black hair comes up in it, you're okay. Well, I'll tell you, desert people are in the sun a lot. My hair's turned yellow. Brother Tristan, I don't know. You know, we could make an argument for you. Your hairs aren't turning yellow in the sun. So, you know, and your whole family there. So maybe we have, 7 or something. So we're Israelites. So what's in a name? I don't know. It depends how people perceive the name that you are putting forth to them. He says, you almost persuaded me from being a Christian. There's a couple ways to look at that. The one way is, you're going down this track defending yourself, and now you're kind of shifting gears on me, trying to make me be a Christian, a Messianic, a follower of Yeshua. Pick the term you want, but they knew what they were talking about when they said Christian right here. Why almost? Because see, we know you're either saved or you're not. There's only, there's goats and sheep, right? And even though we like goats here, you don't want to be a goat in this analogy, right? The goats are going here, the sheep are going here. There's trees that bear fruit and trees that don't. There's branches that bear fruit and there's branches that don't. You're either one or the other. You're either in him or you're not. And so it's like saying, well, I almost bore fruit, as you're being chopped off the tree and cast into the fire. Isn't that kind of sad? Isn't that kind of scary? Isn't that kind of weird to say? There's a great sermon out there, and it's just coming to me, so I don't have the name of it. Oh, yes, I do. It's by Francis Chan, a Christian, and it's called Lukewarm. If you guys have not seen Lukewarm by Francis Chan, go watch it on Google. It's a great sermon. And his bottom line is, he says, and I'm paraphrasing here, and I haven't watched this for a couple years, so if I'm wrong, it's my fault, not Francis Chan's fault. And he has a huge popular church, very rich, and he says, I think if I had to ask everybody in this church, this is him talking to his church, not me talking to you, I think that many, if not most of you, would consider yourselves lukewarm Christians. You're not super on fire, you're just kind of a lukewarm Christian. And then he goes to the verse where you're neither hot nor you're cold. I wish you were hot, I wish you were cold, but instead I'm going to vomit you out of my mouth. Well, what happens to that person who's vomited out of his mouth, metaphorically speaking? You're gone, because you're lukewarm, right? And then he goes into that whole thing. And it's a fascinating sermon. But here's Agrippa saying, well, you almost convinced me to be a Christian, but I guess I'm going to go burn in hellfire. He doesn't say that part, but that's kind of what's coming. So what's holding him back? That's one thing right there, right? He appoints the high priest. That's one of his privileges, one of his duties, one of his responsibilities. He appoints the high priest who will be not upsetting to Rome, or he won't have his position. And so he knows he can't go for this Messiah stuff with Yeshua, because that'll put him at bad with everybody else. Another thing is what we talked about when Festus says, where does he say it? Verse 24, Paul, you're beside yourself. All this book knowledge has made you nuts. Nobody wants to be called a fool. Nobody wants to be called a fool by people in positions of authority, by people in power, by your friends. I mean, these are all the relationship between Agrippa and Festus. There have been times in my life, many years ago, but there are times in my life, there may be times in your life where you hide the fervency of your love of Yah, your following of Yeshua, the way, from people because you're afraid of looking foolish. It's easier, honestly, it's easier not to do that when you are a pastor, because you just tell people right up front, hey, I'm Pastor Joe Fox. And so they expect certain things of you, as opposed to, I'm Bob, the guy working on your car, and hey, Jesus loves you, man. That's a little bit harder. They expect it from a pastor. They expect it from a pastor's wife. And so it's easier. But I think there are probably times in all of our lives when we have worried about looking foolish, call it, use a different word if you want, for our support of the master. Another reason he's almost convinced to be a Christian, to be a follower of Yeshua, is one of the things we talked about, that Yeshua talked to Paul about, was turning from darkness to light, turning from the grasp of Satan to the grasp of the Father. It means, hey, let's get serious about this stuff. We're not just doing ritual hand washing and calling it good. We're talking about following the Messiah and living a Christ-like life. And that's a big challenge. And who's Agrippa with? Who's his consort? Who's his female companion?
Like his sister.
Bernice. They're always mentioning Bernice. The reason we're always reading about Bernice is because it's his sister and it's a scandal. And it ain't right what's going on there. And he would be convicted that that's got to stop. That's darkness, I got to turn to the light. That's of the adversary, I got to turn to Yah. And he's not really willing to do that. How many times have we heard things like, yeah, I'd do that, but I just can't give up my bacon. Bacon. Right? It's like, well, I'd follow the Sabbath, but dude, when am I going to mow my lawn? Because Sunday's the game and I go to church. I can't mow the lawn on Sunday. Sunday's the Lord's Day when we go out to eat and then go to a movie. Right? So that's why. You almost convinced me to be a Christian. Again, that's Christiano. It comes from Christians. You almost convinced me to be a messianic. You almost convinced me to be a follower of HaMashiach, of the Messiah, of Christ. All the same word. All the same person. And we get hung up on saying, well, I'm not a Christian. Or I'm not a messianic. Or I'm not that. And somebody said over here, and you were right, well, that's because of all the stuff that goes with it. I dislike intensely, not intensely, I dislike when people ask me, what denomination are you? Because no matter what, because they don't want to have a conversation, they just kind of want a 1 or 2 word answer that they can put into their little block, and as soon as you give them that word, it's going to be misinterpreted. They're going to say, oh yeah, I know exactly what you are. And boom. Conversation's over. So if you tell them you're a Torah observant, it's like, oh, you're one of those crazy Jew people. You know, if you tell them that you're a Hebrew roots, they're like, oh, you're, you know, whatever. They just think they understand you. And when we use those words ourselves, we put ourselves in boxes, of self-constructed boxes of what we do. We say we're not Christians because of some of the things that come along with our past in Christianity, with celebrating Christmas, right? Let's put the Christ back in Christmas. You can't do that. He was never there. You know, nobody celebrated Jesus' birth. And we all know about that. But that's a big thing in Christianity. But you know what? It's not a big thing in all Christianity. There are Christians who know the truth about Christmas. People who self-identify as Christians. Remember how we kind of started out and I said, whoever self-identifies as a Shofarian is a Shofarian? Well, there are people who self-identify as Christians and they don't do Christmas or Easter. So that's not there. There's Christians who don't like the idea of some pastor in robes standing up in front of a pulpit and being the head guy in charge telling everybody what to do. They'd rather sit around in a living room, whip out their word, and discuss the word. And yet they call themselves Christians. Okay, well, they don't follow Torah. You know what? Neither do you. Everybody here breaks Torah. to one degree or another. We're trying. I do believe that all of us here are trying to keep Torah, but you know what? We break Torah too. And the very sad thing is sometimes we do it on purpose and we make excuses for ourselves and say, it doesn't really apply to me. Or it's too complicated to think about. That's too hard to do. I remember when I was a Christian pastor and I said, I know when Sabbath is, but it's just too hard to change this whole church from Sunday to Saturday. It's just too hard. God would understand. He knows my heart. And so we don't like to use the word Christian. But I tell you, when we tell people we're not Christians, we alienate a lot of people. We alienate our message that we could take out to other people. When we disparage another word, people take you, put you in a box, and throw you over their shoulders. Like, all right, I'm done with you, you crazy living in the woods Torah follower. Turn to 1 Corinthians, please. 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Same guy, Paul. We'll pick up in chapter 20. Paul's writing a letter to the Corinthians. And he said, and unto the Jews I became a Jew, as a Jew, that I might gain the Jews. To them that are under the law, as under the law. Isn't it kind of interesting that he draws a distinction there? To the Jews, I became as a Jew. To those that are under the law, as under the law, that I might gain them that are under the law. To them that were without the law, as without the law, being not without the law to God. Don't worry, I wasn't without the law, I was just acting like it, but under the law to Christ, that I might gain them that are without law. To the weak, I became as I was weak, that I might gain the weak. I am made all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. And this I do for the gospel's sake, that I might be a partaker thereof with you. The gospel, the good news of the Messiah, the Christos. Know ye not that they which run in the race run all, but one receives the prize? Only one receives the prize. So run, that ye may obtain. And every man that strives for the mastery is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown. That's the people who are running a race. People who are running a race, like an Olympic type race, they're running, they get a crown when they win. It's like getting a gold medal at the Olympics. And this is a corruptible crown. But we do it, we run the race, metaphorically speaking, to get an incorruptible crown. Therefore so run, not as uncertainly, so fight I, not as one that beats the air, but I keep under my body and bring it into subjection, lest by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway. So it's like, hey, look, when I go to the Greeks, I act like a Greek, to an extent. When I go to the lawless, I relate to the lawless, to an extent. When I'm with the Jews, I act like the Jews, to an extent. But I keep myself under control. So like, I knew a pastor who was a pastor of a very small town, smaller than this little town down here. And he was brand new, and he came in and he took over a church that was run by a family forever. It was kind of a terrible situation. And only the family was there, and the family didn't like, they don't like those people, so they're not welcome in our church. It was one of those very type stuffy things. And he's like, hey, I'm the pastor in this little town, and my goal is to get everybody in this town to come to this church. This town had a little bar. They sold pizza and sandwiches. They also sold beer. And there were some people in this town that sat at that bar from like 9 in the morning till 9 at night. This pastor started eating his lunch every day in that bar. At the bar. Was he getting drunk and sloppy and drooling on the table? No, he wasn't even drinking. I don't think he drinks. But he was in the bar, and why was he with these publicans and sinners? To win them to Yeshua, to win them to Christ, is what he was doing, and the church told him to stop doing that. Despite the examples, he brought all the examples y'all are thinking of right now up in argument. They said, stop doing that. He ended up not being the pastor there very long. He didn't lose who he was. He wasn't flailing at the air. He knew who he was. He knew how he had to behave. In our case, you could go to a Christian event to speak to them to the way, maybe to get them to understand, those with the law, those without the law, a better what a walk with Yeshua is. You don't have to make a big stink at their little buffet about how, well, I don't eat ham. I mean, ham's a filthy animal and da-da-da-da-da, and offend little Miss Johnson, who cooked that ham all day Saturday so that it would be ready for, just don't eat it. You don't have to eat it. And if somebody says, hey, you should try a piece of this ham here, she'd like it, you can make an excuse. Thanks, I'd love to, but before I came, I'm full. You know, whatever. Keep yourself under control, but you don't have to offend other people, and you can be like other people. And I submit to y'all, and to me, because I'm guilty of it too, and I'm trying to change myself. Most of us here came out of Christianity, discovered the way, and we became Torah zealots, right? And we went through the stage that a lot of people go through. What are the rules I got to follow? Just give me the rules, I'll follow the rules, and I got it. And in my case, I won't speak for you. In my case, I swung that pendulum pretty far over, touching on Phariseeism. This is not the grace of God. This is not the grace of Yeshua. I am not telling you that we can take Torah and throw it out the window, and that we don't have to keep Torah. I'm telling you that we may be looking at it a little bit with a harsher eye than we have to, especially when we're talking to other people. There's a whole lot of people out there who have to understand what it means to follow Yeshua, and there's ways we can reach them, and there's ways we can alienate them. And name calling is a good way to alienate people. Name calling them, name calling ourselves. What are you? I'm a Hebrew Israelite. I'm a Torah, blah, blah, blah. Be careful about what you say. Be careful about what you call other people and how you talk to other people. Try to meet people. My God, I'm starting to sound like a seeker-sensitive church, which I am not. But you gotta, in a way, try to meet people where they are. You have to find out who they are and where they are, come to that point, grab them, and lead them to Yeshua. Truly lead them to Yeshua. And that requires some compromise on our part of acting, not necessarily action. Is that confusing to people? Like Paul says, hey, but I keep under my body and I bring it into subjection, lest by any means when I have preached to others, I myself should become a castaway. Paul's not going to go so far that he starts messing up. He's not going to throw away Torah and go, yeah, it doesn't matter. But he doesn't have to wear it on his sleeve with all the different people he's talking to. That's our message for today. What's in a name? What do you call yourself? What do you call other people? Think about that. All right, let's pray.